Plus, the last evidence that we have is that the early church fathers, who were the preachers of the church in the first couple centuries of the church's existence after Jesus, never referred to these verses. And they referred to tons. I mean, they loved to quote Scripture in their writings. But they never quoted these verses. So the evidence seems to point that Mark did not write these verses. Now, we don't take them out of the Bible because there's still a doubt. Mark may have written these verses. But I think we need to deal with the truth that Mark didn't write them and that they were put in there by well-meaning people. I don't hold any grudge against these guys that put it in. And, I don't think they sinned in doing it. They just thought, well, no, we know that other things happened. Mark must have left some stuff out. Let's put it in. And they just added it from other places. But we need to deal with what Mark was trying to do. I like this guy. When they added the long ending to Mark, it was like putting pants on Michelangelo's David. It just ruins it. He also has a tan too. The tan bothers me, more too. But Mark has created a great work of art, a great biblical picture, and then we come along, or some well-meaning copyist came along and said, oh, no, we need to put some pants on this guy. We need to add something to this to finish it out. And I think this is what they were doing. They thought they were improving Michelangelo's David, but they really aren't. Now, I think what Mark is trying to do is he's trying to goad us into a reaction. He is trying to say, I want to stop right here so that you ask questions. What happened? What's going to happen? Why don't you include the rest of this stuff? We know lots of stuff happened. Why aren't you writing this down? I think that's what Mark is trying to do. He's really trying to get us to focus on what happened here. And so we talk about the women's fear. He ends with these women who are afraid and run away silent. And I think that really forces us to ask a question about why he did this. Mark reports that they ran away in silence. Now, their fear may have been awe. But Mark never uses the word fear in relationship to a reverence, to a holy fear of the Lord. It's always terror in the book of Mark. And he has talked about a lot of people who have been afraid and run away. Well, maybe they needed some time to collect their thoughts before they spoke. Well, who ever heard of a woman doing that? Maybe I should have thought before I said that. Maybe they needed some time to collect their thoughts. But Mark never says, that silence was a good thing. They were silent because they didn't understand, because they were afraid. Mark is not approving of what they're doing here. People have responded in fear throughout the book of Mark. And it's a fear of the unknown, a fear of trusting the Lord, a fear that God isn't in control, a fear of what's happening. And Mark is pointing this out to us. Human beings have been deaf and dumb to God's glory. They just did not understand, and these women continue not to understand. When followers are finally told to speak about Jesus, they say nothing to anyone, one writer said. Now, this does not mean that they never spoke. Now, Mark knows that they went to the tomb. How did he know? They told him. Mark knows that the stone was rolled away. They told him. Mark knows that there was an angel inside there. They told him. Mark knows that they were supposed to go to Galilee. They told him. This doesn't mean that they never spoke, but Mark is focusing on the fact that they didn't speak, and at that time they were afraid. They have an improper reaction, and their silence is disobedience in Mark's eyes. And he has a point that he wants us to ask. Why do you point this out? Why are they afraid? Am I also afraid? Do I also not understand? Fear surfaces among Jesus' followers both before the cross and after. And I think Mark is pointing that out with very, very good understanding of how the Christian life works. The resurrection does not mean that everything is now set right and that everyone will live happily ever after. He does not mean that we will never be disobedient once the resurrection happens. You know, they may have thought that since God has resurrected Jesus, that now we're all good and now we're all fun and now everything's going to be all right. It's not a fairy tale where we live happily ever after. You know, it's not, who is this, Cinderella or Snow White? I don't know. Cinderella? It's not a fairy tale where everything is great. There is still things that cause us fear in this world. The flesh is still weak. And Mark is pointing that out. Because I think we really could have gotten the impression that once the resurrection happens, that everything will be good. But Mark is saying there are still things that make us afraid in this world. He's told us in this Olivet Discourse, which was about the end of the world, that there's wars and rumors of wars that are going to come. And they make us afraid. And he's saying, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to run away in silence, or are you going to share your faith with the world? Disciples need to learn to lose their lives to save them, which means losing our fear. We need to lose the fear that we have that God isn't in control, that we can't trust God. And so he tells us that these women were also afraid. And we can know that that isn't the end of the world, that isn't the end of the story, but we need to deal with it. So what does this ending teach us? What does Mark's pointing out all of these things about the resurrection teach us? I think the first thing that it teaches us is that we still have to live with some ambiguity in this world. We still have to live with the fact that we've never seen Jesus in the flesh. We still have to live with the fact that we don't know all the details about the resurrection that we would like to know so that we could prove it to the world. We live with a world where we don't understand death. The ache of death is not so easily soothed. We have the resurrection. We know that the resurrection will bring our loved ones back to life in the end times. But we also know that we feel grief and we feel pain. Mark writes for those who never will experience Jesus' physical presence. That's us. How are we going to handle that? He's not here. He's risen. But we still have to live with the fact that we never get to see Jesus until he comes again. He doesn't bodily materialize in our church. We'd like him to, but it's not going to happen. How are we going to live with that fact? The resurrection also teaches us that we still have some very cloudy vision. We still don't see Jesus clearly, and we still have a lot of fears in our lives. I think the resurrection, this ending of Mark teaches us that as well. We are not going to see things as clearly as we would like.